evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
89.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture, joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, my friend.
Hello.
We are in the off-season, getting ready for our 2025 season. For those of you guys that are following along on the socials, the Mahoning Roadshow dates have been rolling out heavy and deep. We have 10 dates this off-season, taking our love of the drive-in culture and the preservation efforts that the Mahoning Drive-In Theater has been pushing for over 10 years now to indoor 35 millimeter houses. And we're really excited. Check out our webpage, check out the social medias for all of those dates, the details, the ticks, all that good stuff. But today, Mark, very, very excited for the audience, if anything, because you guys ask for certain things for the podcast. When we listen, you guys really do inform our decisions on the show. And one thing the audience always wants to know more about is what goes on inside that 35 millimeter projection booth. So today we are doing a year in review with Krista, the great Krista, master projectionist, in our first year, full year here at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. So welcome, Krista.
Thank you. Hello. And I am certainly not a master projectionist. I have a long way to go for that. I appreciate the attempt, but
I'll tell you, I guess your official title is assistant projectionist with Robert, but in reality, I do look at you guys as a two-headed beast in that projection booth. So
I think he promoted me to just projectionist.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I see you guys right on that equal plane this year. So it's going to be an amazing ride that we have coming up. We've been in communications in the off season, just bouncing ideas off of each other with the calendar and the shaping of the 2025 season and all of that stuff. But today we're looking back. What a wave, what a ride this 2024 season has been. We did a wrap up with a lot of the crew, the managers, who shared their favorite memories, choice experiences on the lot this last year. And it's like, how do you pick? There's so many, but let's start there. Anything kind of jump out this year as far as like, this was my favorite event, this was my favorite memory?
Oh, wow. 2024, the season gave me the opportunity to project a lot of films that historically have meant a lot to me. And there's something about that. I think a lot of us, at least on this call, and definitely Rob as well, are super movie nerds. And part of that is the excitement and the love of sharing movies with people, inviting people over and saying, hey, you guys got to watch this. And back in the day, it would be popping tapes into the VCR and whatnot.
Hell yeah.
And this I found is just like another version of that. Sometimes my people I know are there, but oftentimes it's the people that come to the theater that I'm getting to know or just don't know at all. It depends on the day. And it's a lot of fun to think of it that way, that you're really getting to share a movie as long as, the presentation's all in your hands. So, no pressure, but
yeah, I love that. Looking at it like that, it really does add to the community aspect of what we do,
Yeah, I love it. I love when people come in and they say they're so excited because they're seeing a favorite film or they're seeing something they wanted to see and it's their first time. And so there are some pretty big ones this year.
Oh God,
so
yeah.
It's very hard to pick a favorite for me. I think the annual event that I love the most is Universal Monster Mash. I've grown to really adore that. I've gotten to run movies I absolutely love with all my heart. And this year I ran Dracula and Bride of Frankenstein and then co-projected some others with Rob. But that was exhilarating.
A treat.
When you co-project, explain to those out there, how do you guys divide up the duties? Like what's going on in the booth while a film is running, if it's just the two of you?
So the way we do it, and that started with how Rob was training me initially, we essentially each take a projector. So we're threading up alternating reels and then doing alternating changeovers. And then we both try to keep eyes on the screen at all times. It's kind of serving as a backup pair of eyes while the other person's doing thread ups and whatnot. And if there's any winding to do, we'll help each other out with that as well. But essentially, the labor is divided by projector, which is really funny because I saw in one of those projectionist Facebook groups, I think, someone posted a photo from one of the old movie theaters that's closed now. And it was a photo of the floor in the projection booth, and one projector had a worn spot like just right next to the projector, and the other one had this big wide circular area. And the comment was, you know which guy was just standing there focused, and the other one was pacing full of anxiety. And I thought that was so funny, and it reminded me, of how Rob, I'm like, hey, I guess people were always doing this. And some of the projectionists that have been around for a long time and were working back in the full film days were commenting that sometimes their partner, that's not someone they would like. So it was kind of this not very fun thing for them, but others collaborated very well. And Rob and I, fortunately, we collaborate very well. So this season, I was basically assigned to do one feature each week on my own, more or less. That was the workload I had. Plus, that shifted towards the end of the season. I was taking on a little bit more. And then it was up to me. I would voluntarily co-project with Rob, and he encouraged me to do that just for more experience.
I love watching you guys work together. Like, that's why I say, like, the two-headed beast, the two-headed monster. Like, having you guys work a dual projection system together, it really is like having an extra set of hands that really come in handy with the workload that the Mahoning takes on. And to see you guys, I liken this to a band all the time. I have a music background, but to see you guys kind of harmonize in the booth perfectly, like you guys are a couple, which I think is so rare, for any, I don't know if there's any projection couple team that, is rocking it right now. But to see you guys kind of work in harmony and support each other, it really does raise both of your bars, and naturally the Mahoning bar in the process.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's more fun, but I think we both enjoy collaboration. When you have a partner to collaborate with that works well with you, it makes the endeavor more exciting,
Heck, yeah, sharing in the fun, and the joy.
Yeah, and I know a main thing we would do is anytime the two of us were signed on to work one of the triple feature nights, the standard was typically we would co-project the third feature just to prop each other up. We each would take a solo feature as the first and second. The one time we didn't do that was for Witch, Burn Witch, Baby Burn, because we both wanted to work with Suspiria. So we co-projected Suspiria, and that was wild. And then I ended up doing the third movie myself. So,
well, that's a good kind of inside the booth thing as well. Like, how do you guys break up the films? Like, is it purely a luck of the draw, drawing straws? Or are you able to bid on, hey, like, I really want to project this movie?
I think it's a mix. And I think with my living further away, it would depend largely on what sort of schedule I was able to contribute to.
Right.
And so that would dictate certain weeks. Other times I would go to Rob and be like, hey, I'd really like to run this. And sometimes I don't know if that's corny or not. I've never talked about this with other projectionists. I might still be in like the honeymoon phase, where to me it's a thrill to work with certain film prints and share those films with people. Rob always says, he'd rather have someone that really cares about the show or the feature running it versus someone that has no opinion on it. Doesn't mean the show's going to be better or worse, because I think everyone that's ever worked at the Mahoning put 100% into, each film, whatever it was. And so it's not really about that, but there's something to it. I think it's that that act of sharing. So sometimes that would dictate it. That wasn't the norm, but once in a while, something like Rob really wanted to run the Last Picture Show, and that was a wonderful night. I really wanted to see it. Sometimes that dictates it too. One of us will just really want to watch the print, so the other one will agree to run it. And
and I think that's the level of passion that you guys bring to it as well. Is you called it the honeymoon phase, but I think when people were doing it for 40 years and 50 years and longer, it just kind of became an old grind. And
right.
what we do is so kind of zeroed in and focused and special, and the appreciation is there, that to have two people that are so proud of what they do, it just people feel that, they really do.
Yes, proud, folly and all, but yes, we take pride in it, that's for sure. Because it matters,
Well,
the audience is primary, and they deserve a good show every single night, whether it's a small audience or a sold out audience, and whether it's a really classic, wonderful film or something really terrible.
yeah,
That terrible movie is somebody's, treasure film. So,
somebody's favorite.
yep.
I've always said that, like, no matter how bad a movie I think a movie is, I'll
Mhm.
always see somebody go, "Oh my God, I love that film." So it's like every movie is somebody's favorite movie.
That's right.
Absolutely. I have
too.
my list of movies like that too, that other people be like, what? So,
All good. Well, speaking of, the challenges, like as far as any behind the scenes, behind the curtain technical things that might have gone on this season, or that might, have given you the thrill to overcome.
I had a fairly lucky season when I was projecting solo because nothing too terrible went awry. Knock on wood, I probably jinxed myself for 2025, but remember I had a real take up issue that Rob happened to be nearby. And so it's all, most of these problems when they've come up, it's like all you really need are extra hands that are competent to deal with it so that you can still focus on the show. So Rob stepped in to deal with some take up issues. I think throughout the season, the theater had some take up issues, particularly with Projector 2. We had a pin break issue on the take up reel, and I know it snapped again when we were showing Hocus Pocus.
Yes, I was trying to remember what it was mid-show. I actually took a video, and that's up on our Patreon. But a great inside look of, like, you never know what's going to happen. You always hope that everything runs properly, but we are kind of the kings of pivoting if something, if literally a pin falls out.
Absolutely, and it was. I believe it happened on reel 3 when I dismounted the reel from the Take Up magazine. Something fell off into the magazine, and I determined, I think the pin snapped again. We were doing so well for months with the repair we had, and it happened then. And I happened to have Rob in the booth, so we determined, the easiest solution right now is to just do the take up by hand manually, or at least guided manually for reel 5 so we could complete the feature. Fortunately, it was a single feature. Oh no, actually it was a double feature night, but the second was digital because I don't think there's a print of Teen Witch, correct? So
correct, yeah. But it was one of those things where, like, we got to share this with the audience. I actually had a bunch of people come up and was like, that was the best, experience at the Mahoning that I've had. Just as
Hocus
far as
Pocus?
yeah, that Teen Witch, like, right turn, because they were like,
absolutely,
I was here for Hocus Pocus, but I'd never seen Teen Witch. By the end, they're like dancing around and kick it. It's just such a fun, lighthearted movie that.
Listen, I don't know that film, and I think I need to watch it, but it was starting, and we didn't know how that was sourced, because Rob and I tend to not have anything to do with the digital exhibitions. That's you. And we were looking around, and the start of that movie is kind of, excuse the phrase, but it's a little porny, or at least like late night Cinemax type of thing.
Yeah.
And we were like, is this the real Teen Witch? We were standing in the booth looking at it, and we're like, And I think
Total
finally,
Mahoning right
desperately,
there.
someone Googled one of the actors' names and it matched on IMDb. So you're like, oh,
Virgil
thank God.
accidentally bought a copy of something called Not Teen Witch.
Yeah.
I should hope so. So that was funny. But yeah, I mean, that's the nature of how we work together. Rob stepped right in and did the dirty work while I, continued with the presentation at hand. And we had Zach in the booth too, who's been really interested in the 35 millimeter projection process. And he has a bit more of a mechanically inclined mind. So he jumped right in and was like, hey, what can I do? And he helped actually fix the pin for now. Yeah. And the fix stayed in place through the rest of the season. I don't think we're going to take for granted that it's a permanent fix again, because I have a feeling there must be something in there that's causing something to wear down faster, or the break to happen repeatedly. So but we know solutions. We can prepare to have extras on hand, and we also have the time to dig now and maybe find the exact proper part we need, if that's possible. And the big thing I learned this last season is, I'm becoming more comfortable projecting the film. I need to know the projectors better. I need to know machinery better.
Yeah, well, I say it's like working on a car every night,
Yeah, and I'm not that guy. I have zero experience doing things like that. And I thought at the very beginning of training, I thought that was going to be the thing that I would never have confidence with, that the machines themselves were always going to be intimidating to me. But the way Rob and Jeff worked with me, they really slowly got me acclimated with the equipment. So I don't feel that way, but I want to be able to have more confidence for when the things go wrong, or at least identify when things are not working as well as they could be. So that's my current off-season project. And
it's such a poetic art form where it's it really is a mastering of a specific machine,
Yes.
where we always say our machines are quirky. I don't think anybody can come in and just jump on because they're a projectionist and think hey, this is like writing anything else. I think that's the case probably any of the movie houses we're going to.
Correct.
They all have their own individual quirks and
absolutely, yes. Every booth is different. All the presentation operations are going to be different. Everyone has a different pattern and timeline of things they do pre-show, post-show with house lights, or in our case, our outside house lights, and all of that. So it's all quirks. I think it's few and far between people that can just walk into a booth and say, okay, I can, I got you.
Totally. Absolutely.
It's always worth having a bit of a tour first.
Right. Well, you guys get the front row seat of the madness that we bring to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, i.e. guests and all the added icing and elements. People come into that booth all the time. All the celebrity introductions happen inside of that booth. Anything pop out as far as a memorable moment in that sense of, maybe not projection, but the hoopla of it all?
Oh gosh, yeah, we had such lovely guests this year. They were all so kind and interested in what the Mahoning's doing. They engaged with us outside of their meet and greets at the table. And I know the Look Back podcasts mentioned so many of them. The one that stands out to me the most was when William Ragsdale and Stephen Jeffries were there for Fright Night. And they were, when we met them at first, they were so kind and so funny. And when we first met them, they were asking questions about the booth and saying they were so excited that this was a drive-in and that we were running the film. And I ran the feature that night. So they actually were in the projection booth pretty much through the entire
whole time, yes.
And they were watching the film and watching me work and asking questions and just getting up to look at specific scenes, which, that meant there were a lot of people in the booth and but I was they're so into this. And I loved seeing somebody appreciate their own work and their own film, like through our perspective. So I was just like, you know, they were very good about being mindful. And if I asked someone, if they had to move, they were very accommodating. But they were such gentlemen and they were so fun. It was a terrific experience.
They were amazing. And I brought up the story of Chat and Mannequin 2 with William. He's like, never bring that up again. Well, I'm trying to think of like be in the audience's mind. Like for us, we've been doing this now for so long. Can you walk us through a little bit of like the process of, okay, a film has landed at Roberts or wherever it's landed. What is the process of getting that print ready to shine?
Okay, so first and foremost, we check to make sure the actual print that was expected to ship is the one that shipped, that they sent the correct version. I believe that's happened where.
Oh, yes.
With that time when we were playing, we had Jill Sholin out and we were playing The Stepfather. And the studio sent us the Stepfather remake. And of course, none of us remembered that there even had been a Stepfather remake. And it wasn't checked well enough, I guess, to dictate that to realize that it wasn't the original. And it hits the screen and Harry's like, what is this? The rest of the audience. Yeah.
And so, you want to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen again, but also just check for any initial shipping damage just in case. I don't think we've really encountered too much of that. Once in a while, if someone's not doing a good job taping up the reels, the film will come loose. But I don't think we didn't end up with any shipping disasters. I don't think. I think we had one collector where one of their plastic cans cracked, unfortunately, but the film was fine. So that intake happens, and say if it's a film I'm running, I do Robert's set up with a workspace at his house. I do all my film inspection on site in the projection booth. So I would take the print and it goes through a full print inspection, and we complete a print inspection report for that. And what that entails is you just take it reel by reel, you wind through, and one thing you're constantly doing is you keep contact on the edges of the film to make sure there aren't any broken perforations, because that will risk a possible tear or a break in the machine. Right. So if you encounter any of those, you do want to make sure to repair them so that you have a better journey for the film through the projector and a better screening. So you're looking for that. Any splices you encounter, you want to check that the splices are healthy and redo any that may need it. If they're old cement splices, you want to reinforce those because they can become brittle over the years, and you run the risk of them just snapping apart in the machine. And for the inspection report, especially if you have the time, you want to note any significant damage to the print that you're seeing, significant emulsion scratches, any sequences where there's a lot of damage, even if it's repaired already. I usually note that, just that it's there, and things like that. It's mostly scratches you would be noting. Some theaters do very, very detailed work with that. We do whenever time allows, but we try to get the very significant things noted on those reports. And then
I think it's worth noting as well that a lot of theaters don't do that at all. And
absolutely.
It's I think a huge benefit that you guys bring to the community, where you put in that work to really get a print back up to snuff per se. That shines in its run as it goes on to the next house. It makes it that much easier, or an easier process for the next projectionist. So
absolutely. I'm in a situation where the print of Mallrats we ran, I believe in 2023, which I projected. It was one of my first features I ran by myself, and I inspected it. Ambler has, I think it's Ambler. Yeah, it's not Highway. Yeah, the Ambler Theater has
the Ambler Theater, yeah.
So Jesse's got it, and he messaged me because the shipping label still had our label under it where you could kind of still see. And he was sort of uncovering the shipping labels on it. He's like, gosh, how many times did you guys run this? I think, well, we ran it, in 2023, and apparently it hadn't gone anywhere until now it's at the Ambler. So
that's amazing.
I was the last person to run that print in all likelihood. So I told him, I said, let me know if you know, because Jesse and the projectionists at Renew are extremely thorough. They complete extremely thorough reports. And Rob and I have been getting samples of their reports and learning what, the detail they go into, and are aspiring towards that. So he was in contact with me, noting certain scratches he found and everything. And I was like, I found the report we had because I had actually sent a copy to Universal, and the same information was on there. So I was like, oh, good. That was already there.
That's amazing.
But that's why, it's kind of a useful record to have, because it could have, he could have been pointing out something to me that our projectors had caused, which would be alarming because of the damage that's on those reels. But no, I noted that they were already there when we had intake on the print. So yeah, that's why those reports are important records. So besides that, and then you want to get the reel projection ready. So we are changeover projection, of course. So you need to make sure your head leader is the appropriate length, and that your film is going to land in frame, which means your splice is on a full frame and after a full frame, not that something gets spliced on with a half frame, because then it's going to throw out your whole framing. You're going to have to, yeah. And then the tail, you want to mark where the cue marks are, or note where the cue marks are, and make sure that you have enough, or not enough, because we adjust to whatever's there generally, but how many frames you have after the changeover cue, so how quickly to do that changeover once you see the signal for it. And so you just want to note all that, so you know what your timing is going to work out to when you're actually running the print, and if all goes well, nobody notices that you're doing it. And so it goes through that process. And then everything gets wound, heads out, ready for showtime. I do a final check. I usually check that the reels are going to be sound in the magazines and not wobbly. That issue really hasn't come up, so I feel like I probably can stop checking that. And then it's just a matter of running the show.
Yeah.
And then after that, you have to wide the print back to however the source sent it to you. Most of our collections and archives send things heads out, so they have to be returned heads out, which means rewound after projection. And then there are a couple collections and collectors that prefer tails out, so at that point it's a matter of getting it back to them in that orientation. So
and you're winding those on and off different reels. They arrive on, it's always plastic reels,
yes.
Right?
Yes. Plastic reels, the shipping reels, which are light plastic, or cores. So a core would just be the round plastic disc with a round hub with a hole in the middle, essentially. And
that would be like your center of the film.
Yeah. And then you mount that onto a split reel, which is a metal reel that you can take apart. So you have two pieces. You put the film in the middle and then reattach the reel. So it's not ideal to use those in the projectors themselves, but when you receive the film on a core, you just mount it to the split reel, wind it onto a house reel during your inspection process, or however many times it's going to have to go back and forth, depending on the orientation. So
it's such a unique technical job, but there's so many little intricate details that need to happen for a show to go off without a hitch. And you mentioned it, hopefully nobody notices. And
right.
It's such a unique job where it's like, hey, if you're doing it right, there really should be no attention on you, It's a very thankless kind of job,
No, but that's how I prefer it. Just forget I'm here.
Pay no attention. I'm behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Well, we get prints from all over the country, all over the world, from like every studio. Anything pop out as far as like, hey, this was the most beautiful print of the year. This was maybe a rougher print or challenging print.
This is a print I can't believe made it to the end of the last reel.
I'm I'm not going to call out prints like that on a podcast.
Well, let's not say that. How about not the bad one?
I would if it was ours, but I don't think we ran anything completely. Well, I didn't run anything completely atrocious from our collection. I recall the Big Circus was a very beautiful print on the workbench. It didn't look like it had been run.
Yeah, tell us
for a while.
Tell us all about what nobody was able to see that night.
Yeah, I was on vacation the week before that event. That was a Mystery Science Theater weekend. Joel Hodgson had selected himself. He picked The Big Circus and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. The Big Circus was Friday night, but I was coming back from Montauk on Friday, so I swapped nights with Rob. I'm like, maybe it's better if you run the print on Friday and I'll do the one on Saturday, just so I'm not driving 6 hours. And, so I had ended up inspecting it. Actually, I ended up inspecting both of those. And I was looking at the Big Circus and I was like, I don't think this is... At first, I thought it may not have been run because I couldn't find any Q marks on Reel 1, but then it turned out, they were there. They were slightly different Q marks than I was used to seeing, and it was the one I would usually go by to initially find the initial set. It was so well camouflaged in the particular image it was in. So that was kind of funny and humbling, but it really didn't look like that print had seen a lot of projector time. It was in beautiful shape. The colors looked beautiful on the bench. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited to see this movie because I love circus dramas.
You hyped it up. We were like, yes, let's go.
And then Rob was, excited to run it and he was going to watch it after the fact and everything. And then showtime comes Friday night and fog rolls in and you couldn't see anything.
It was like dancing images, a dancing image in the cloud,
Yeah, the very last, I think, 10 minutes, if that, the fog lifted. And you saw, how beautiful it looks on the screen. It wasn't a crystal clear shot, so there was still a little bit of mist and haze, but you could see how marvelous that print probably did look. Except we never had the opportunity to see it.
You never know what you're gonna get. You really
don't. I don't know if you'll ever reprogram that, but
it's a hard one. If it weren't that title, I'd be like, oh, we could work that into this. Big Circus, such a deep cut gem.
That was a very beautiful print to see, and I'll say, I'm gonna sound corny again. I was assigned to run The Shining, and we ended up with Exhum's print for that. And it turned out Exhumed had, I think, an original print of The Shining. I think that's what was delivered to us. And I started inspecting it, and beautiful print, especially considering the age, but warm. The colors had warmed a little bit. That's very common. It definitely wasn't red or anything, but you could tell the color shifted to a little bit of warmth. And I remember we told the audience that, hey, you're going to see an original print tonight. and that's exciting, but, expect to see some wear on it and whatnot. And the print actually projected very, very well. And I thought there was such an intensity to running that film. I think I was in the booth alone for most of it. And then you eventually came in, but that music
it played like a dream, it does.
That music and just the slow dread and intensity of that movie. Sometimes you really feel that while you're projecting it, and I really did that night. And I think the fact that the print was the age that it was and looked the way that it did completely added benefit to the show. So I'm like, this is a unique experience. This isn't some restrike that just happened and that's been around. This is like the original thing people saw decades ago, and it looked spectacular, and it added so much to the eeriness of that movie. And I remember somebody came out from I think it was Kentucky that night, remember?
Yeah, Thursday.
And they were like, oh, I drove here for I think the first time to specifically to see The Shining at the drive-in. I was like, well, no pressure there. On a Thursday. But I think they got a good show. And
hell yeah. And we had another visitor that day too in the booth.
We did. Speaking of guests that I love, the dog man from The Shining was there, and he was wandering around. And I remember I was, pre-show, because the Thursday thread ups probably became, I loved them. You had planned that series. It was the first year we did it. You had a goal in mind for, what you hoped the audience would be every week. And that goal was far and away exceeded most weeks, if not every week.
Yeah.
And the audience we got on those Thursdays was so terrific because it was a lot of first timers. Every Thursday, somebody would come in and be like, "Oh, it's my first time here," which is crazy for a weeknight that was repeatedly happening. But we drew some people that were instant regulars and just people that love it and just were out there for a good time. I remember Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. We had a group of women come to the booth and they're like, we don't even really know what this movie is, but we kind of have a list of things we want to do to have little adventures. And we did this one tonight. But they were so excited.
Oh, that was another one,
and they stayed and loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. But when the audience brings that heightened sense of fandom, and it really does create an experience, even on what we consider a quiet, light night, like a Thursday or a Sunday or something.
And I'll bookmark that screening, but like that audience became so important to me because they were so rewarding to have as visitors. They were so appreciative of the experience. And that night I was alone in the booth. We had a good crowd for it, but we just weren't getting, the booth wasn't mobbed for once, which was good for me as I got to, prep the show pretty sanely. But all of a sudden I'm threading up projector one and I turned around and the dog man is sitting in the chair behind me just watching me. I was like, what? And he really startled me.
Baby.
And then he just kept like walking out of the booth and he'd come back into the booth.
So in character.
When I say the dog man, I hope everyone knows who I'm referring to. It's the man in the dog suit in The Shining, in that one very bizarre shot that happens, and completely creepy when you're not expecting it, and maybe even when you are. But one of the times I went up to him like, do I know who you are? I was like, this has to be someone we know that's just like messing with us, right? And having a laugh.
It was a mystery all night, and I think
he was a mystery. I found out who they are. They revealed themselves to me a couple weeks later, and very lovely person. They were back quite a few times throughout the season, or at least a couple of times, and I hope they continue to come back.
They bring a certain energy.
It's my little secret for now.
That's the thing. None of us know. You're the only one.
I know. I love knowing things that no one else does. So if that's the secret I get to keep, it's I'm keeping it until they decide to reveal themselves.
I don't want to take up all your time. I do want to give Mark an opportunity to ask some questions, but again, being in a unique position at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, is there anything that you've been able to kind of take from the booth or the position and carry it on like into, I guess, quote unquote, real life or other things in life?
Oh gosh, that's a fantastic question. I think socially it's opened me up at least a little bit because I tend to be a bit of a loner. I tend to spend a lot of time doing things on my own without even really thinking about it. And all the curiosity and friendliness and kindness we get from the guests there really reminds me, like, people are pretty fantastic. They're terrific. Yeah. And I've made so many, friendships from our regulars there and the staff and everything. So there's that aspect. There's slowly becoming less and less intimidated by machinery. And I have a long way to go. I have a long way to go.
That has to be so rewarding. I know that everybody really has risen to their positions over the years, and to see you guys really take such ownership in the booth, like it's a sense of pride that I'm sure you carry with you. It's the same thing that we get when we put on a good show, and it like that high carries you through the week.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing with our theater and 35 millimeter projection. It's still kind of not it definitely isn't the norm anymore. Sure, there are plenty of theaters set up across the country that do it or are capable of it. There are very few theaters that run it at the pace we do, and we're open. But the problem is nobody is out there manufacturing all the things we need, all the tools we need, all the equipment we need. Those are all relics of the past, with few exceptions, but your main things that you need, the projectors themselves, the lamp houses, your splicers, your frame counters, your rewind benches, everything, that's all stuff that you need to find. And I think a big important thing, I think this mission is so important to the Mahoning to keep doing this, that we need to be on top of making sure we have the tools we need and making sure we have backup tools that we need, and really foster this format to be able to sustain it. And everyone is so dedicated. You're so dedicated to that mission. And Rob and I, we prefer film nights. When the nights we have to go digital, it's a little bit of a bummer. But, the programming will dictate that. And once in a while, it's okay, it's a little bit of a break too, which is nice. But it's always a downer when a print can't be unearthed for a screening. So all that stuff's really important. So it's made me network more, because we need to know other people who have access to these other things, or who have the experience of sustaining these projection booths for so many years. And they'll point out things like that I haven't thought of, or Rob hasn't thought of, hey, make sure you start supplying yourselves with A, B, and C. And networking's been a big thing.
I think that's kind of the era that we're in. It's been this kind of natural progression, our growth, our success, the legend, all of that. But now we are at a true peak of connecting with other theaters, making friends with other projectionists, creating this ever-growing network, or at least pulling the right people into ours.
Absolutely. And it truly is communal, because it's not like I was able to go to projection school and get a projection degree and learn everything I need to know. You have to learn from other people doing it. And Rob shared all his knowledge with me, but Rob is also a believer in constantly learning and learning more. So he's always looking for people to learn from. And we have this community of people in the area now. They're always a go-to with questions. I have a couple projectionist friends that are the best of the best, and they're in my back pocket. When I have a real problem, they can often give advice or help me, walk through a solution. And I find that just about everyone in this field is so generous, because I think they realize that that's what it's going to take to sustain all this. You have to teach younger people to keep carrying it forward. And I was kind of, a late bloomer here, but I'll do what I can for as long as I can. But it's like, I don't know the word for it. There's a word in my head and I can't find it, but it's not textbook learning. It's like gathering and learning, learning from your peers directly. So that's what I've gotten from that, because that's a new experience for me. I was always into going to class and taking a test and earning some knowledge in that way, but this is a whole other thing, and it's much more rewarding and satisfying.
Absolutely, and invaluable. That's why I think you guys have taken on this position and taken it to a whole other level with your willingness to embrace this knowledge and this growth. And having the two of you in the booth just really puts such heart into that booth, which of course Jeff always passed down and did such a great job of passing that love and passion down.
Absolutely.
To both of you guys. Can you talk a little bit about that before I kick it over to Mark, as far as your relationship with Jeff before he passed? You worked with him pretty much for that whole year that you were, I guess, in that training mode.
Yes. Rob was kind of doing the more constant active teaching, but Jeff was always there, and Jeff was the guy to ask the questions to. And once I started actually doing things, he started reviewing what I was doing or critiquing what I was doing. And most of all, though, he cultivated me as I don't want to say not a personality. That's very much the wrong word because I am not that. But he genuinely like invited me in and made me feel comfortable, whether that was going to amount to learning anything or not. It was even just, I was somebody, this is what everyone says about Jeff. He always invited everyone in. He fostered all their curiosity. He gave them really terrific conversations about history. And there's so many people I know that I'm like, gosh, I wish you could have sat down with Jeff for like an hour and just, and Jeff, I remember going into when I was training, he commented to me that, he's like, you really, I think he said it on the podcast, I really came out of my shell in the projection booth. And a lot of that's attributed to him because he was so patient and welcoming, and his historical knowledge was so vast, and his humor just made every long night so much richer. And going into this season was pretty strange because there definitely was a missing piece in that booth. And I think the way we looked at it was honor him every day with the best show we can possibly put on, and take care of his things in there. And me, if it was all up to me, I'd be like, nothing's leaving this booth. We're not changing anything. I know that's not realistic. I hope certain things can absolutely stay, like that star scope. I think you'd have to pry it out of my hands before you got it out the door because I love having that in there. I know it's beautiful. It's totally a backup system. We don't even engage anymore, but it's there and it works.
Yeah, there was such pride in that equipment. That's something he certainly passed on to all of us. He was a true Obi-Wan in that sense of, he would drop nuggets of knowledge. He wasn't somebody who would, sit there and, wax philosophical with like hours of technical knowledge. He would drop them in, and these little things that you can carry with you. And
absolutely, yeah.
It's such a gift to us all. Well, thank you for carrying on his legacy. You guys do such an amazing job of preserving his legacy every single night with playing his intro and outro and giving him such an amazing ode as he so deserves every night.
Absolutely. He's always going to be the spirit in the heart of that place. So
absolutely.
And you had mentioned something to us. We never talked about it publicly. We went at the end of the season, the last weekend of the season was Jeff's estate auction that a bunch of us went to. It was Rob, you, Virgil, myself, and Jeff C. We all went because we knew a lot of his film collection was going to be part of that. And we wanted to make sure that some of that was retained so that people he knew could have some of his films, his prized possessions, his 16 millimeter films, his 35 millimeter films, his insane record collection. And which is, I knew it was big, but I didn't know how big until we were there that day. And that man never stopped buying records because there was stuff that was pretty recent in those stacks.
Oh, yeah. There was, yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing to see. And we were sort of there in spirit, in the spirit of camaraderie and wanting to, retain things for the theater or maybe things for ourselves. But you had said to me when we were waiting in line to get in that it bookended the season. Like Jeff passed away just before the start of the season. And then we were all coming together in his honor or in his spirit at the it's almost like the last day of the season to do that.
It was, yeah. It was I think it was either right after the season ended or right before. Actually, yes, I think there was a show that night. So yeah, that was a lot more of an emotional experience than I was prepared for it to be. Yeah, and I can't imagine how it was for you, Virgil. And
I just am so proud that we were able to get some of these choice items and again kind of preserve these things that really deserve to be within the quote unquote family. And we were able to get some really good stuff. And I know that Jeff was a huge 16 collector. You're a 16 collector as well. You were able to, what was it that you were able to grab? I know that there was a title that jumped out at you.
So these auctions, whoever organizes this event had no idea what was really there, right? You're just like, oh, it's a bunch of old films, throw them on the table. Like, we're looking through the table, and there was a 16 millimeter reel of the 1935 The Raven, which I love that movie. Maybe my favorite Universal horror movie, but if not, it's definitely up there. And I had the privilege of running that at Universal Monsters in 2023.
Yes.
And I remember talking with Jeff about it. And I remembered him saying, I have a print of that. I have that at home. And kind of a flippant comment that at the time I was like, oh my God, I love, I'm so jealous. That's wonderful. And kind of forgot about that until we saw it there. Yeah. And I said to you, I was like, Virgil, is it okay if I put in a bid to at least buy this or get this? If it makes no difference to anyone else. I'm like, this is the one thing I would absolutely love to have of his.
It was such a weird day, but it was cool to be able to, get some of these choice items and, let them shine. That was always his thing. He was a huge collector, passed that on to all of us, and the fact that we're able to kind of retain some of his prized possessions, it's exactly what he would want,
Yeah, and we did rescue quite a bit of the 16. A lot of it's in the theater.
Yeah,
I kept that title because you were very kind to say that would be okay.
Absolutely.
And I think a couple of us kept a few choice things, but everything else sort of went to the quote unquote theater collection. And I think you were distributing some of it to certain people as well.
Yeah, we were grabbing, he had so many projectors and 45 players and things like that, where at a certain point I was just like, well, I'm going to start buying some stuff in bulk. So, we can some of his friends and family and say, hey, I don't know if he ever will have a use for this, but this was his 45 player he used to prep his DJ sets and all that.
Yeah.
So it really was an amazing thing that we had the opportunity to do. So.
Yeah. And that kind of thing, I think, means a lot to somebody to hold on to,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was able to get, he was a big Three Stooges fan, as am I, and I was able to get his 16 millimeter print of what is my favorite Three Stooges short.
Oh.
It did have one little edit in it, and my guess is that it might have been a TV print, and it might have been something that was taken out because a certain joke may have fallen out of favor at that point in time. Which is, to me, is interesting. I mean, I've got it on DVD. That's cool. But that edit in that print is like, well, that is an artifact of that moment in time where that one little shot was not so cool to whoever was running it at the time. And you bought a box of random 8mm films. And there was one choice nugget, and then there was a multi-part one that I think you maybe gave that away. I don't know. What was the best and worst of what was in that box?
Well, there was a lot of newsreels in that box that covered parts of history that I did not need to rehash in my home. So
it was of its time. It was like, the series World at War, Victory at Sea.
Yeah,
and it was just a multi-part history of Hitler.
Yeah.
And I remember how horrified you were. You're like, this box is all Hitler.
Found the Hitler box.
It was like a desperate grab too, because we were like, we don't even know what's in it. We didn't know the rules really. We didn't know that you could actually go and tear into these boxes and see what everything was. So we were like, oh my gosh, let's get that, make sure we have that. And then it was like, I did end up with an 8mm of the Poseidon Adventure, which is fun, but there's a lot of World War II news in there, and I'm like,
well, you had to dig through a lot of Hitler to get to it.
I appreciate that this exists, and I know there's people that are more on the historic collectors. Like the only real nonfiction I collect on 16 is any NASA newsreels, and there weren't any in there. So.
You only have a bunch of that on 35, right? Were you ever there for that show?
No.
In the first collection that Jeff bought, he bought this gigantic, we always call it the big haul, huge collection of 35 that a private individual had. There are multiple reels of this stuff called Space News.
No way.
I
had no idea.
We ran a full reel of it, and it was excruciating because it's a news reel that's marginally interesting at, like 2 minutes, but times 10, it was a lot. But just so you know, for future reference, there is at least one reel in our archive of Space News.
That might have to make an appearance after a feature one night so I can see it.
If we ever did like Apollo 13 or something that was,
which I think we should.
Something about the space race, that would be cool. I would play one before the movie, because it is nostalgic and it is from that early 60s era. But in a row, it was like that infamous night at Patreon where it was just 20 minutes of the opening titles of various films. It was.
Yeah, we were like, what were we thinking?
You're like 5 minutes and you're like, okay, that's enough. And then you realize you have 15 minutes left.
I'm just putting it out there. We do have a friend that has a copy of Apollo 13 on 35. So.
Booyah. 4th of July is on a Friday.
There you go.
And will only serve freeze-dried astronaut food.
Poor Virgil has to deal with all my brilliant programming ideas that no one would expect.
I love it.
Sometimes somebody will say that to me and I'm like, it's a great movie. I would love to see that. And 3 other people would enjoy that. That's the balancing act you have to do. It's like you don't want to only play things that are going to sell us out because that the titles get kind of boring after a while, but you also don't want to play things where you're just losing money every night you go out of business. So it's like that, I
think you guys do a really good job balancing
it's
that,
a balance.
Though. We had a lot of bangers in 2024.
You were talking
of all types
to Trey at the Philadelphia Film Society about the upcoming road show. We did a podcast. I think it's the last podcast as we record this that we just.
Yes, I listened to it. Yeah,
and that's said the exact same thing. You have to do the balance of the mass crowd pleasers and the deep cuts that you really hope people come out to see. And it's fun to craft that and hope that that the books balance at the end of that. Speaking of collecting film, you are a film collector, as we were saying, 16 and 35. Have you gotten anything interesting lately since we last talked? Because I think we talked about this in your origin story episode and that you had received Mr. Ed episodes.
Yes.
One of the best we ran in the Patreon was yours this last year, too.
Oh, yes. Yes. Can I say what it is at this point? Or
that is between you and the FBI as to what you talk about having. But I
don't have anything. We didn't run anything. Most of my stuff is 16. I've tried to discipline myself and say no 35, despite my friend trying to sell me his copy of Apollo 13 on 35.
So much space.
But it's space and it's opportunity. Yeah, because it's like, well, now I have to convince someone that they want to run it, I mean, honestly, I am in a position where I kind of have the opportunity to maybe run something once in a while. That's not something we ever take advantage of, but I guess it is there. But I also just feel I have a lot of trailers at this point, but that gets addicting.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when you think of like, we do those post-show trailer reels that I think we're going to continue. I think very often they're always appreciated by somebody, whether it's a lot of people sticking around or not. But it's just like, well, somebody needs to own the trailer for Tightrope. It may as well be me, because I hope the drive-in shows it someday.
Well, I mean, if you ever do a Clint Eastwood thriller, absolutely.
Boom.
Yes, because it would pair quite well with Play Misty for me. I think theaters have done that before, but I'm not sure. But speaking of which, Play Misty for me is a title I acquired on 16. It's a pretty beat up print, but we actually ran it New Year's Eve. We ran it New Year's Eve here, and it was a fun watch. It's very warm, but still watchable. And that movie is it's either really dark or it's really funny. Like, it depends on the day you're watching it, And I've acquired more Mr. Ed episodes. And some German stuff was the most recent that I've watched. I had the opportunity, someone was selling an old German Heimat film on 16 on one of the forums on Facebook. And I grew up, my dad was a video hound, but mostly it was like German bootleg movies. And every time I would like kind of walk in when he's watching them, it's always people in the Alps singing or something. And it turned out there's this sort of pseudo genre that exists of film called Heimat film, which is German mountain film. It's this thing that happened post World War II when, that Germany was so devastated by itself and of itself that a lot of the art went to shift towards like how things were before World War I, and sort of these idyllic lives in the mountains and farmlands and things. And someone was selling one of these films that wasn't available on home video. So I grabbed it because I wanted to screen it for my dad, which I did over the holidays, and he got a real kick out of it. It was called Heidelberg Romance, and it was this very quirky little German screwball comedy. It was pretty adorable.
From when?
Awesome.
I'm not gonna remember the year. I think it was the 50s.
And English translated at all?
Subtitled. So yeah, it was German language, but 1951. I was very close. Or technically correct, but and it so happens to be another film I was excited about acquiring recently was The Strange Countess, which is a German crime thriller, like an old Edgar Wallace movie. Which I like those. So
one of about 800, I believe.
Yes. So I haven't watched that one yet. The prints, pretty worn. I don't throw money bags out at film prints. So I usually tend to acquire things that are either pretty faded or, a little worn. And it's perfectly fine for me,
Yeah, I get
as long
that
as it's projectable and
way.
looks good. Yeah.
It's a way to like scratch that itch. I'm like, I'm just gonna go hit the 50-cent record bin for a little bit.
Yeah, because 16 features, they can I'll be like, oh, that's so cool. This is available. And it's like the collector wants $2,000 for it. And I'm like, that's beyond my means.
Yeah.
But someone will enjoy that.
Yeah. If you ever find a print of Superbug, the German Herbie ripoff, or the sequel Superbug Super Agent, let me know. I actually have a trailer, a 35 trailer for it was labeled as Super Agent Superbug, but it's basically a German Herbie who's a spy. And
hell yeah.
What? That sounds like it could be problematic.
This is from like the mid-70s. So.
Okay, that's safe then.
Good times.
I had no idea. I'm gonna have to look into that. So thank you.
I want to say that the Super Agent or one of the Superbugs is on YouTube, widescreen dubbed.
Ooh, okay.
It's out there. Just it's not like a great copy of it. The biggest question I have for you, and I did not prepare you for this, so if we need to run the match game music, we will.
Okay.
You were allowed, against all better judgment, to program a weekend at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, of horse films.
Horse films.
Which 2 to 4, because we'll give you the whole weekend. Horse films would you run?
My reputation precedes me. I know I talked about that on the last podcast too. The Black Stallion, because that is a beautiful film. And Criterion will back me up on that because they released a beautiful disc of it. I watched that one growing up, but that's I think it's 79. It's Mickey Rooney is in it, directed by Carol Ballard, and just a very beautiful meditative movie. So I'd have to pick that. There's an Australian film I love called Far Lap, but it's kind of a bummer. But I do have this weird magnetic draw towards Australian cinema that I've realized over the years. And Far Lap was a movie I used to watch a lot as a kid, so I would include that one.
I remember when that was on HBO all the time.
Yeah.
And Black Stallion, I always as a kid got mixed up with Black Beauty because they were
of course
everywhere. And I remember when Black Stallion came out, it wasn't a big hit at the time, but it was marketed as though it was going to be. So they were like Black Stallion storybooks and all kinds of like stuff for kids around when it came out.
Well, the Black Stallion started out as a book series by Walter Farley. Wow, I remember the author's name. There's many of them. There are many, many Black Stallion books in the series. And I think the movie did come after that.
Yeah.
Did it come before? Because I think they were 70s and older.
Yeah, I feel like the movie was spawned based on the book. I just remember seeing all the stuff with the kid and the horse on the cover.
Yep.
Like book order, book club, school book club, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of Black Beauty, there have been so many film versions of that, including one that came out during the pandemic on Disney that was not half bad. And I think Kate Winslet, was the voice of the horse, if I'm remembering correctly.
No, it was a talking horse.
Amazing.
It's a Disney film. No, the horse doesn't actually talk to people. It's not a Mr. Ed situation, but I wouldn't pick that one. It is good. But the original, there's not an original, but there's a 1978 animated version of Black Beauty. I would have to have that involved somehow. International Velvet, I love, is a fantastic melodrama.
That's the tape.
Yep. And I have 2 16 prints of that. One's a TV print. And I'm not really married to keeping both of them. I just haven't gone through the avenues of offering one of them up for sale. But there's that International Velvet's available. I see that all the time come up. And a movie called Sylvester, which was Richard Farnsworth.
Yeah.
And
Melissa Gilbert.
Thank you. Yes, I didn't want to say the wrong name. Yeah. Another sort of melodrama that starts on a ranch and becomes, one woman's journey to the Olympics with a horse.
Was that set in contemporary times to when it was shot?
Yeah, I think the 80s, 85, yeah.
Being a video store hound from my youth through adulthood, as long as they lasted, and just nonstop gazing at box covers. I know about so many of these movies. I've still never seen them, but I remember the box for Sylvester and the font for Sylvester and Melissa Gilbert and her image and her name were on the cover. So that's interesting. You're bringing up all these movies I remember from when they were in heavy rotation on HBO, but I never watched.
Well, if Virgil wants to make this dream come true, it'll be an opportunity.
You never
for
know
us all.
when the calendar is going to call for the equestrian,
And we get a local horse farm to bring horses out and pony ride.
Come on!
Absolutely, yeah.
Now you're selling.
Equestrian, like a riding show with the obstacles and whatnot under the screen.
Come on.
Yes.
On Sunday, you run hot to trot.
Boom! There it is.
Yeah, that would be obviously the crown and jewel of the event. I love that movie.
You're not alone.
Well, we cannot thank you enough for making the time, for opening up the door of the booth and giving the audience a peek inside. I know they are going to love this episode and appreciate it so much. And beyond that, thank you so much again for all that you bring to the operation, bringing that heart, that love, that passion that has elevated us so much this past year. You mean so much to us, and thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. And, I love being on this journey with all of you. I have to say, I think I had this thought, I may be the only active film projectionist right now that's never projected a film indoors as of today.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is wild.
If you really think about it, that might be true.
Yeah. Well, again, we are such a unique outfit, and I love that on both of your guys' social medias, yours and Rob's, you guys do such a great job of sharing your love and passion out there to the world. It's such a key element to what we bring that we're really going to try to lean into it even more than we have this year to, bring some things like this, peeks inside the booth for the audience.
Oh, yeah.
So we're excited.
Yeah, very much looking forward to 2025.
Let the adventures continue. And for those of you guys out there, be sure to check out the social medias, follow us, the road show, grab your tickets. I know that some of those shows, believe it or not, are already at close to sellout capacity. So do not hesitate. Grab those while you can. We will see you guys on the road, and we will see you at the drive-in in April. And on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.